Welcome. This is a webinar that's put on by both Bench and First Base. We're partnered to help startups from all over the world succeed. Bench through tax preparation and filings, First Base through U.S. entity formations. We wanted to put together a high-level resource for our communities that walks through what you need to be thinking about when you're getting ready for tax season, particularly as a non-US founder. And just wanted to make sure that everyone kind of knew about the various nuances and some offerings that you can use to kind of help make the process easier on yourself. Allison's going to be speaking to the tax prep side of things, as she's very well versed in that from her work at Bench. And so, yeah, if there's without any further ado, we can just hop into it. We have a deck that we're going to walk through. And at the end, we will go through some frequently asked questions to help kind of preempt anything that folks are wondering. So, yeah, without further ado, I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll just get into it. Just give me one moment.
Awesome. Well, Ian, I'm not sure if there's anything else you wanted to add before I take things over, but I'm excited to get started, and we've got quite a lot of meat and potatoes to go through here. Just know we probably won't answer all of your questions today. Recording of this webinar is going to be available after the fact, and you can always come and speak to us here at Bench or reach out through First Base to get those additional questions answered. So please take notes and understand that you can reach out and get those specific questions answered at a later date. So what we're here to do today is to talk a little bit about all the things that you need to know in order to file your US taxes, whether you're required to do so, under what situation, and then how to actually go ahead and do it. Because as all of you business owners have figured out by now, the IRS is complicated and they really benefit from being complicated. So between First Base and Bench, we're going to try to dispel some common myths and hopefully break up this pretty complicated information into something that feels a little more manageable. So you all know all about First Base, but I'll get you to flip to the next slide, Ian, and I'm going to introduce Bench. So here at Bench Accounting, we handle bookkeeping, tax prep, and in some cases, tax filing for all US-based businesses that are registered in the US, whether you're an international shareholder or not. I'm located in Vancouver, Canada. We have reps from all over the place in North America. And, we also deal with a ton of time zones. So again, I think I said this at the beginning, but for anyone who didn't hear me, thank you so much for joining. I know it might be the middle of the night where you are, or if you're watching this later, thanks for taking the time. So in a nutshell, Bench does bookkeeping. We pair you up with a team of in-house IRS-compliant bookkeepers. And we take the financial back end off of your plate, focusing on IRS standards. We have an unlimited communication policy, and that's part of why I'm here today, because we want this information, rather than being gate kept, we want to make it easy and accessible to you. So that's the skinny of who we are, but I'm here to talk specifically about tax filing. So let's get into it. Hop onto the next slide. We are first and foremost going to cover all the things you need to know in order to file your taxes. We're going to talk you through some tips for getting organized for taxes. It's not a simple process, but there is a formula. And then I've got some secrets to share about tax season readiness. And as Ian mentioned, we're also going to go over some frequently asked questions. As we've talked about, the session is going to be recorded and sent out afterwards. We are not going to do a live Q&A today, but you'll be receiving a ton of resources by email after the fact. And then again, feel free to come and talk to us here at Bench. We are the experts and we want to make things easy on you. Step one, what do you need to file your taxes? Before we can answer that question, we first need to figure out when and why you're liable to file taxes in the United States. The first question you need to ask yourself is on the next slide. And it's, do I perform services or sell products in the United States? Most cases, I say err on the side of caution and act as if you know you're going to need to file taxes in the US. That said, even if you've got a US-based business, There's going to be some situations where you don't have to file taxes. Lucky you. Before you look at all the tax forms, you want to determine whether the income you've produced is subject to US taxes. And for many of you who are foreign owners of a US-based business, you're only going to be taxed in the United States if you are engaged in a trade or business within the US. You're considered to be engaged in a US trade or business if you perform services or sell products inside the United States. The income that you earn in this way is defined as effectively connected income. Now that acronym ECI, not super important to note, but we will send out a resource afterwards that defines this more further so you can take a look. Now, if you're not engaged in a trade or business in the United States, you're not going to be taxed on any income, even income that is generated in the United States. To give you one simplified example, and trust me, I know this stuff isn't super easy to get on the first go. Let's take a European software company that provides programming services for United States-based clients. This is a company that's fully based in Europe with no offices and no US-based employees. They open up a US registered LLC because they want to start accepting USD and payments into a US bank account. All of the work is performed in Europe. The LLC is owned by non-US citizens, all of whom reside in Europe, and any employees who do perform these services are not located within the United States. In this example, it's quite likely that the LLC's income is not going to be taxed within the United States as the service is being performed outside the US. That said, the revenue is still generated within the US as the service is being offered to a US client. Now, I'm going to leave the example there because this is not a hard and fast rule, and it can in some cases depend on your country's tax treaty with the US. So it's really important to talk to a trusted source about your business specifically to make sure you understand your requirements and responsibilities. Once you've figured out whether or not you need to file taxes in the US, then it's time to start looking at a checklist of documents and things that you need to have in order to be prepared. So if I'm liable to file taxes in the United States, there's going to be some things that we need to have ready. Basic information like your business's EIN and banking information, your income from last year if you had any, make sure to record that as 0 if you didn't. Any quarterly tax payments that you made, your PIN, and your IRS password. The next thing is going to be any applicable government forms. And we're going to be talking about some of those specific forms that are special as a foreigner in the United States on the next slide. So just give us a second there. Business income and expenses. This is going to be an income statement, which is also called a profit and a loss. And you want to pay specific attention to the costs of your goods sold or cost of service if you provide a service. The last thing there is your financial records of all of your expenses. Hanging on to receipts is really important, and we're going to go over a timeline for that at a later date. But the long and short of this is any expenses that you have related to the business, many of them are going to be tax deductible. That's the point of bookkeeping. We want to make sure that we can lower your taxable income by recording all of your expenses and bringing those financial records to light when you're ready to file taxes. Don't worry, we're going to send out a checklist after the webinar, so no need to take screenshots. All these resources are going to come directly to you. Let's walk to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the tax forms that are special and important to know about if you're living outside the US, if you're not a US citizen or permanent resident. So Form 1116. This is the foreign tax credit for an individual, a state, or a trust. And this is a form that non-US citizens who pay taxes in their home country, so not in the US, but in your home country, this is the form you can use to claim the tax credit on their US taxes. This will reduce your overall tax liability by proving to the US that you've paid taxes already in your home country on some of that income. In order to be eligible for this tax credit, you've got to be an individual, an estate, or a trust that has either paid or accrued taxes to another foreign country or US possession. So if you haven't owed any taxes in your home country, this form's probably not going to apply for you. Any businesses that have incorporated through First Base, this is the form you're going to want to look at. The next form we're going to talk about is Form 114. This form is used to report assets, foreign bank accounts, and any foreign financial accounts outside of the United States. Some further examples are listed there: bank accounts, brokerage accounts, and mutual funds. If the total value of these assets outside the United States exceeds $10,000 at any time in the calendar year, you're going to be required to file Form 114. So let's say you make a huge deposit into one of these accounts in outside the US, and your balance hits $10,001. 5 minutes later, you take out $500 and it's below that $10,000 threshold. It doesn't matter. That amount over $10,000 will have been recorded, and it automatically trips a requirement to file Form 114. Now, if these two forms sound complicated, you are not alone. It took me ages to get used to this stuff when I first started working at Bench. We're here to help, and we can walk you through these. Even before you're a client, this is something that we can help you understand and decide if these are forms you have to file yourself. Now, the next thing that we're going to talk about is specifically based on your business's tax filing structure, because there's a couple of different government forms that you might need to file, and it can vary sometimes year over year depending on how your business changes. So, single member LLC, SMLLC, that's what that acronym stands for. This is an LLC that files taxes as a sole proprietorship. If this applies to you, these two forms are required in order to properly report your income. So Form 1120, this is a US corporation income tax return. And you might be wondering, how come if I'm filing as a sole proprietorship or an individual, I have to file a US corporate income tax return? The reason for this is it's actually somewhat new. It started in 2017. So if any of you who've had US businesses in the past are thinking that this is different from your prior experience, we had a big rule change in 2017 that required all foreign-owned single-member LLCs that are disregarded entities, meaning you file as a sole proprietorship, you now have to be treated as a corporation for federal reporting requirements. Now, this does not mean that you pay taxes like a corporation. It's simply the requirement to report this information the same way as a corporation does. So I'll say that again. If you're filing as a sole proprietorship and you're a US-based entity owned by somebody outside the US, you're still paying taxes as an individual, but you've got to report that income using Form 1120 as a corporation. That second form there, Form 5472. This is information return. If you've got at least 25% foreign ownership, so outside the US, meaning if you're an individual, you own 100% of it and you're not a US-based citizen, this form definitely applies to you. The main thing here with 5472, when it comes to C Corps, we're going to talk about that in a second. So yeah, this is just basically anyone who owns a company from a foreign perspective or who have a shareholder who owns more than 25% of the company. This is going to be a required form. Popping down to C corporations, there you're going to see Form 5472 again. And I've put this at the top because there's some really important information to know. For C Corp businesses, if you are required to file 5472, meaning you have more than 25% ownership and you fail to do so, there's actually a $25,000 penalty associated with misfiling that form. So this is totally separate from taxes owed. Even businesses that are not yet earning income can sometimes be subject to this $25,000 fine. And this is something that we want to avoid for you at all costs. So making sure that you understand when and why you're required to file that $25,000 penalty, you're required to file Form 5472 can help you avoid that $25,000 penalty. The next thing down here is Form 1120. It's the same thing as a single member LLC. I know that most e-commerce businesses that incorporate through First Base, that might be a lot of you. You're probably single member LLCs filing as a sole proprietorship. Just keep in mind, even though you're just an individual, you've got to file that same Form 1120 as we do on the C corporations list. The final thing here is Form 1042S. This is a foreign person's U.S. source income subject to withholding, and there are a ton of complications of whether or not this form is required. So we're going to leave it here and understand that not only this webinar, but also all the resources that are explained in this webinar are going to be sent out to you with links to definitions. It's going to explain each of these forms in detail and a checklist that tells you when and why you need to use them. So no stress. Just hearing the names of these forms once is a great starting point. Awesome.
One thing I would, one thing I just really quickly add is that, as as you're all beginning to see, this is not a simple task. It's something that we were really intentional with when we partnered with Bench. Is we understand how common of a need this is to have some help on the tax prep side of things. So through our partnership with Bench, we're actually able to offer not only exclusive discounts, but we've added Bench to our Loop program. So you as a First Base user are able to very seamlessly apply for a Bench account through the Loop section of your dashboard, and we'll include instructions on all this. But all that is to say that it's okay to get help with this stuff. It's not straightforward by any means, and we would certainly encourage you to, if you think it makes sense, to work with the Bench on this.
Yeah, I know we're not doing a live Q&A, but I do see one note in the chat that I want to address here. I see a mention of, what if I'm an LLC, but not filing as a sole proprietorship? There's actually two things that you need to be aware of. The first is your corporate structure, and the second is your filing type. There are tons of combinations of these, but if you're a foreign owner and you've got an LLC, there's really only one thing you could be, which is filing as a sole proprietorship. There's another entity type out there called S corporation. We haven't touched on it today because as a foreign owner, you're no longer able to produce an S corporation entity within the United States. And if you have a question about why that is, please come and talk to us. A C corporation is probably the move for you. Awesome. So because we've got limited time here, I'm going to move us on to the next section. We just talked about all the forms. Once you're required to file in the US, all the specialized forms for foreign owners. We're going to shake that off and take a deep breath because that's definitely the most complicated part of this webinar. The next thing that we're going to talk about are some ways to get organized, because the number one thing we want for you as business owners who've incorporated through First Base is a feeling of peace when you walk into tax season. You can set the foundation for a comfortable tax season with limited stress by getting organized early and checking in with your organization often. So if we hop to the next slide, the first thing that we're going to talk about, and this is definitely the area in which Bench is most positioned to help, is getting your books organized. When you're doing your own bookkeeping, it's extremely important that you double check all of your transaction categories. Many of you, especially as entrepreneurs, have likely owned businesses before, or maybe it's your first time and you've never really heard of a tax deduction before. The IRS is really particular about the type of spending that you have. And you want to make it as easy as possible for the IRS to see the transactions that you've had in their respective categories so that you can prove to the IRS that those are tax deductible expenses. Bench handles all this for you. But if you're doing this on your own through a DIY software or using pen and paper or Excel, you've got to be double checking those categories, especially for generic categories like Amazon. You got to make sure that your Amazon purchases are separated from business to personal. And if you know what you've purchased from Amazon, there's probably a deeper category it can go into. So keep track of those receipts, make a note for yourself if you're doing this on your own. The next section here, balancing the books. You have to make sure that every single dollar is accounted for. If you leave some dollars unaccounted for, it's just an invitation for the IRS to come and take a deeper look at your books, which is something that we definitely want to avoid. Even if you're doing everything perfectly to IRS standards, if you miss something, you could open yourself up to an audit and a whole lot more stress. Reconciling your accounts. This means looking at your transfers from checkings to savings, This means identifying when you've paid off a credit card that has business expense on it. If this is feeling overwhelming for you, or these are terms that are not familiar, talk to a professional bookkeeper. Getting help sooner rather than later is always recommended, especially because most quality bookkeeping firms run out of availability when it comes time to tax season. If you want to stay on top of it yourself, but just find that it's not happening, highly, highly recommend that you talk to a professional at least 1 quarter before your taxes are due to give everybody ample time to do this properly for you. The final note I want to mention on this is don't include any transactions beyond December 31st. December 31st is your typical fiscal year end. Could be different for you if you've set something else up. But the important thing to note is the date after the end of the fiscal year, those transactions should be cleared. It's going to be attached to a different tax year than the one that we're in. So I'm just going to repeat myself on this because being organized is so important. You might miss information or have to repeat steps if you do things wrong the first time. And as new entrepreneurs or repeat entrepreneurs, you must know that your time is the most valuable asset. Bookkeeping is the backbone of your business. It's a need to have, not a nice to have. And you need it from day one of incorporating your business in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter if you don't have income yet. It doesn't matter how low your transaction volume is. Without proper bookkeeping, it can be so difficult to find funding, whether that's a loan from the bank, a grant from an organization that you're partnering with, or you want to have investment or sell the business down the road. More than anything, bookkeeping is what protects your business's profits by recording your expenses and showing the IRS all of the tax deductions that you and your company deserve. So now that I've read you the Riot Act on getting organized, let's talk a bit about the types of documents you're going to need in order to feel organized. So let's hop to the next slide. This is a snapshot of a larger article that all of you are going to be sent out alongside the recording to this webinar and more detailed information about all those forms we already talked about. A quick view of what to keep and how long to keep it. We talked about wanting to have every dollar accounted for to make sure that you're getting all the deductions that are available to you. You need to have documentation and proof available to back up all those tax deduction claims, not only just to pass through the IRS's tax filing process, but in the event of an audit, you need to be able to back yourself up. So let's take a look at the graph on the right here. Your past tax returns. The IRS is going to have a copy of this if you filed with them in the past, but you should readily available have your tax returns for at least 3 years historically. You want to be able to produce these documents quickly. If the IRS or anybody else asks for them, the longer it takes you to get them, the more extended this process is. It's going to eat away at your time to produce revenue. Receipts. This is a tricky one. If you have a professional bookkeeping solution that's doing your bookkeeping based off of your banking transactions and your credit card transactions, it's very likely they won't need to see your receipts. That's the case with Bench, and that's a huge time saver, but it doesn't mean that you can just shred them or throw them away. You've got to keep those receipts for at least 3 years. And with receipts especially, we always recommend that you digitize your records. Try to take care of this as you go so that it's not a rush to the finish line come March. But if you scan your physical receipts, you can save them in, the term is leaving me. It starts with a D. Ian, I'm sure you've used this before. It's a storage facility online. Dropbox. Thank you, Talia. We recommend Dropbox because it's free. A lot of people also use Google Drive. There are some receipt-specific organizations like shoebox.com. It's a digital replacement for that physical shoebox you might have kept receipts in the past. These are just some examples you can use to digitize your records, from receipts to tax returns to other miscellaneous financial records as well. Those digital copies, they're easier to keep and organized, and they're also way easier to search for if you've named them properly. So that's something to keep in mind. Employment tax records, we actually suggest that you go back as long as 4 years. If you omitted income from your return, keep records for that for 6 years at least. Now, if you deducted the cost of bad debt or worthless securities, we up the ante to 7 years. You have to think about long-term storage and storage in a way that's not going to be affected by water damage. No fading, like paper receipts can fade in the sun. Yeah, Google Drive and Dropbox. Those are great free solutions for this. Awesome. Let's hop to the next slide. And we're going to talk about preparing your business's financial situation for your potential tax burden at the end of the year. So there are tons of different approaches to this. It depends on your corporate structure. It depends on how much revenue that you're earning. But if you're really not sure and you're new to this, we suggest you follow the 30% rule. Taking 30% of every dollar you touch, so 30 cents on every dollar that you earn, take that and put it aside. This will ensure that you have enough to cover your tax burden at the end of the year. So I'm going to repeat that rule of thumb because it's really easy to listen to. 30% of every dollar that your business earns, set that aside and prepare to kiss it goodbye with taxes. We recommend that you create a separate bank account for this. That way it doesn't feel like money that your company can spend. Now, I understand, and all of us here understands, that for many of you, investing your profits back into your business is your number one priority for scaling. But we're here to tell you that budgeting and setting aside funding for taxes is a necessary step in your journey as an entrepreneur. The extreme stress of not being able to afford your tax burden at the end of the year and being indebted to the IRS is something that Bench and First Base have a mission to avoid for all of our clients. When it comes to paying down your tax burden, there's a few different methods for saving. You could do it per payment, per revenue earned. This is a really good option for people who receive large lump sums from their clients, as it's pretty easy to calculate that 30% off the top. For some of you, like in the e-commerce space, we are receiving tons of transactions all the time. We recommend that you look at this on a monthly basis and just make a monthly transfer when you're balancing the books. Another option is yearly. It's just going to depend on what's right for you. And it's also going to depend on the information you have from your prior tax year. If you know that historically you've had no trouble paying down your tax burden, you might be able to relax a little and do this on an annual basis. Awesome. So once you've created an account and you're starting to stash away this money for safekeeping, the next thing I want to talk about are the secrets that we have to tax season readiness. Now you can hop to the next slide here. The secret, you might have heard me say it already. It's not so much of a secret, or at least we don't want it to be. The secret to being ready for tax season is bookkeeping. I just want to reinforce here that it's not too early to start, even if you're a brand new business and all you've done is purchase your incorporation through First Base. There is huge value in having IRS-compliant support at your fingertips, somebody to talk to and ask these questions with, somebody who's used to doing this type of research and has seen your situation before. The moment that you start having expenses in the business, that's the moment you need bookkeeping. Whether you're doing it yourself from a DIY perspective, or you talk to a professional out of the gate, we are really lucky here at Bench to be able to offer you pretty steep discounts as a brand new business through First Base. And we'll talk all about that if that's the right fit for you. I just want to reiterate that even if you are pre-revenue, it is crucial to record and categorize your expenses and identify any areas of spending in the business. Awesome. So we've talked a lot about this, but bookkeeping does more than just tax readiness, even though from my perspective, that's definitely the most important function. Bookkeeping is also going to give you regular financial insights that you can use to grow your business month over month. If you're someone who plays in the stock market, we know that looking at the history of a company is the best way to help predict the future. The same is true in your company. If you want to see trends in the business over time, understanding the best times of year to make big expensive purchases or investments in the company, bookkeeping is the best way to get that insight. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Having clean financial records will help you in your quest for funding, whether it's a loan, a grant, or you're trying to bring another investor on board, or you're preparing the company for sale. Many of you will need an up-to-date balance sheet in addition to an income statement or profit and loss. And that balance sheet really helps in those funding conversations. This is a lesser known document that Bench produces for its clients on a monthly basis. The last piece here, if I leave nothing else with you, bookkeeping protects you from IRS audit. The other thing to mention, and many of you may have seen this in the news, the IRS was recently given more funding by the US government, and they are making new investments into their small business audit processes all the time. The likelihood of being audited has increased, as it does, I'd say, on every 5-year basis. It's at an all-time high. This is stressful if you're not recording your records cleanly. Bookkeeping will make sure that those records are kept properly, they're kept up to date. And if you do use a professional service like Bench, who can guarantee IRS compliant books, this is something that you're never going to have to worry about. Let's hop to the next slide. And I'm going to shamelessly plug Bench because I know that many of you are not going to want to handle these financial record keeping on your own. Bookkeeping with Bench is pretty simple. It can be an overwhelming process, especially a time-consuming process if you're doing bookkeeping for the first time. So hiring an outsourced bookkeeping service like Bench can help you with that, giving you unlimited support, time back into your business, and most importantly, peace of mind that your books are correct and up to date. So we do most of our bookkeeping on a monthly basis. We help you keep track of your cash flow, your profits, your expenses, and we make sure that everything is tax ready so that you can pay your quarterly tax estimates if that's something that you have to do, or if it's something you do annually, we'll support you with that. My favorite part of Bench from a bookkeeping perspective, outside of the unlimited communication and support, is actually how we handle your tax preparation at the end of the year. Many bookkeeping solutions will do your books on a month-to-month basis. At the end of the year, Bench also produces what we call our year-end financial package. It's an annual culmination of all of your month-to-month reports, and it makes tax time really simple. It's actually built specifically for a tax professional to use. And if you sign up before tax season, we can guarantee that your statements will be ready in time to file and that they're always IRS compliant. We can even directly refer you to a tax filing partner that specializes in international shareholders. This is the common flow for all first-based clients who come through Bench. We can make sure that your taxes are ready to be filed and then hook you up with someone who's professional and ready to go to file them. Implementing a sustainable solution with a team of experts. This will ensure that you're IRS compliant out of the gate and don't have an expensive mess to clean up come February. We have an in-house team of experts that you can get unlimited guidance from at no additional cost. Think of us as business Google. Bench staffs a client research team. They work directly with our clients to answer any tax-related questions. Even if it's outside of our scope of filing, we can make sure you get the understanding of what your responsibilities are, especially regarding questions about foreign-owned businesses. This is on an as-needed basis. If you're someone who likes to be proactive about this kind of thing, Bench is definitely going to be a good fit. That's just about everything I wanted to say. Now, Ian, I know that you had some questions for me, so let's take a look at those before we wrap up here.
Absolutely. And, I'll just before we hop into it, I'll say again, we partnered with Bench because we see how much value they bring for business owners like the ones that we help through First Base. There's so many things that you need to be focused on, and oftentimes tax preparation is not one of the fun ones. So, as much as we can, we want to offer tools and services that can help streamline, how you're spending your time. And Bench is a really valuable one for making sure that you have all your bases covered come tax season. So, like I said, we offer Bench through our Loop integration. So it's a really seamless sign up and application process. If you go to your First Base dashboard under the Loop section, you'll find the Bench offering, and we'll have more instructions there. But we've made it really, really easy to take the first steps to get the tax preparation ready. And we'll just hop into a few frequently asked questions. I know folks have more specific questions, but hopefully these can answer some of those. So, to kick off, can Bench file my taxes for me? And I think that this is an important one.
Yeah, so in some cases, yes. In many cases, especially for all of you, the answer is unfortunately going to be no, but I can explain why. What Bench specializes in is that bookkeeping, the backbone of your business. This includes all of your expense categorization. We can help you find tax deductions and make sure that it's all organized and ready to go. We also produce that end of year document that we just finished talking about. This has everything that your business needs to file. If you're a US permanent resident or citizen and you're living in the US, we can probably file your taxes. But if you live outside the US or you're not a PR, in that case, you're going to need to bring that year-end tax package to an independent tax professional, either a CPA or an IRS enrolled agent. If you don't have somebody in your network, not to worry, we do. We actually have a company called TaxFile, TaxFyle. You'll get some insight about this in your email. TaxFile is the company that we partner with and send all of our international or foreign-owned US-based businesses to for tax filing. They're super familiar with working with our year-end tax package. And even though it's two separate companies, it really feels like a seamless experience. So if you're somebody that doesn't have a CPA in your network, or you're really not sure where to start, we can point you in the right direction, even if we're not the ones who can take care of it from start to finish. Ooh, this is a good one. So what do I do if I'm a year or more behind on my taxes? This could be maybe you didn't file in your first year because you didn't have any revenue and you didn't know you were supposed to. This could be because you were super, super busy and you didn't understand when you'd have taxes due in your country versus in the United States. Whatever your situation, just know it's really important that you file these tax years in succession. So let's say you're missing 2020 and 2019. If you had 2020 books like 3/4 of the way done and you thought, I'll just file that now and get that out of the way, take a second and look at the bigger picture. The whole point of this is obviously satisfying your IRS compliance. And if you file those tax years out of succession, it's just a really easy red flag to the IRS that maybe there's something else going on that they should take a deeper look at. This, from my perspective, is something we want to aggressively avoid. So from Bench's perspective, if you have several years of outstanding taxes due, there's little stress if you're working with Bench versus if you're doing it on your own. We actually have a team of specialists dedicated to all clients who need more than 2 years of bookkeeping or 2 years of tax filing. We can get you set up with that flow. It's a very handheld process to get the bookkeeping up to date and ready for filing. But the main thing I'll leave you here, if you're more than a year behind and you've got several years to file, we want to make sure that we file those in succession. And the way to start making steps towards that end goal is by doing the bookkeeping back to date one or back to whenever you started. The third question here is, oh, go ahead, Ian.
No worries. I didn't bring in any revenue. Do I still need to file taxes? And this is one that we see a lot.
Yeah, so there's often some conflicting information about this, depending on which resources that you look at. I'm here to tell you that if there's ever a question of whether or not you need to file your taxes, just go with the answer is yes. There's no reason to open yourself up to further scrutiny. If you didn't bring any revenue, you may still need to file taxes, but that doesn't have anything to do with how many taxes you're going to have to pay or how much that burden is going to be. If you didn't bring any revenue, there's not going to be anything for them to tax you on. So you probably are going to have to file something called a $0 return. And this is true even if your entity was open and you didn't even have any expenses either. It's not just about revenue. So if you're not sure how to file a $0 return, or you're not sure what that is, you can always come and talk to us, ask questions through First Base. They're probably going to direct you to Bench. And if you're not ready to engage in services yet, we've got a really amazing free resource through our blog, which a lot of these articles are going to come from. If you're on our blog and you have a question, whether that's tax filing, $0 return, no revenue, international business owner, you can search those keywords and a whole host of resources are going to come up. When you have further questions than that, that's a really good indicator that you should get on a phone call or a Zoom call with us and let us walk you through it.
You know, the general theme here being that if you're unsure, speak to an expert, because like we've been saying throughout, the work you put in now to preempt these issues will pay off multiple times over as far as time and cost savings down the road. So preparation is best here.
Now, before we hop to this summary, I did just have another thought here. If I didn't bring any revenue, why should I still file my taxes? Why should I still report those expenses? Startup costs are filled with tax deductions. Like we said, anything from your incorporation fee, your initial software, web hosting, all of that. If you don't have revenue in your first year, there are many situations where those expenses can carry over and reduce your tax burden in your first revenue earning quarter. So record keeping, super important. And if you're sitting here thinking, I'm not equipped for this, that's why services like First Base and Bench exist. So let us give you a hand. That is everything that we wanted to cover today. And trust me, we know it just scratches the surface. So be reminded that this session's been recorded. We're going to send it all out for you. We're also going to send you our small business tax checklist so you can help to understand exactly what forms you need to file, when and why. And I'm also going to send out a resource on tax implications and forms specifically for foreign-owned businesses in the United States, because we know that this is the most confusing area. Outside of that, if you have further questions, we've got a chat feature on our website. We've got a help inbox. And better yet, just give us a call. If you dial into our inbound line, someone's going to be picking up that phone call and ready to talk you through your situation right away. Our aim is to get you started with bookkeeping whenever you're ready. So we do that by starting with 1 free month of historical bookkeeping to make sure that it's going to be a good fit and to prove to you, what that service is going to look like before you even have to sign up. And then the next stage of that, when you're ready to start, because you're incorporated through First Base, you've got some really awesome opportunities available to you. I think Ian's going to talk a bit more about that. So I'll just pause there, and I'd be really excited to speak with you.
Thank you so much, Allison. We're at First Base, we really try to take a lot of the guesswork out of being a business owner. We're trying to democratize access to a lot of these resources that have historically not been widely available. And Bench is a really great example of that. What they're doing for bookkeeping really helps folks who, maybe this is their first time with their business taxes. This is their first time business. That's really where Bench shines, is just helping everyone across the board, making sure that they have all of their tax preparation handled well. And like I've said a few times, we're partnered with Bench through our Loop program. So as a First Base user, you can log into your First Base app, and under your Loop offerings, you'll be able to, in just a few clicks, apply for and set up a Bench account with an exclusive discount through First Base. So, I'd highly encourage you to, if what you heard today, has you questioning, hey, is this something that I want to handle fully on my own? Is this something that I'm really set up to do successfully? Then, I'd highly encourage you to either take advantage of the Bench offering, or just reach out and, speak to Bench, figure out if it makes sense for your situation. Always ask questions. I know, Allison and the whole Bench team are really open to working with folks, even if it's before you sign up for a specific solution. So yeah, we're really proud to be partnered with Bench, and through our Loop program, you can actually go ahead and get this all set up. So yeah, and like we said, we'll be sending out a follow-up email with everything that you need. In case you weren't able to make the entire webinar today, that's fine. We'll be including the recording. And then, feel free to reach out with any specific questions that you have. But outside of that, Allison, thank you so much for taking the time. It was really, really great to have you on, and, to learn from your expertise here. I know that I learned a lot, and I imagine that a lot of our attendees did as well.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to speaking with you. It's been a pleasure here as well. If you hop to the next slide, I just wanted to show you that you can take a look at our pricing online. If you're not ready to sign up right away, that's okay. We're still very happy to speak with you and put a timeline in place so that we can be setting you up for success and not letting this slip through the cracks. As a First Base client, you're eligible to 50% off of your first 6 months of bookkeeping and tax prep with Bench. And honestly, in my years working at Bench, that's the steepest discount I've ever seen from a partner offering. And we know that it's because it's the perfect fit to get newer businesses set up for less. allowing you to feel prepared for tax season without breaking the bank on an initial standpoint. So yeah, further questions, I can't wait to talk with you. And other than that, Ian and First Base, thanks so much for having us.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Bench. And most of all, thank you all of our First Base users. Have a wonderful rest of your week and keep an eye out for that follow-up email.